Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to undergroundwellness.com. I get to hang out today with one of my most favoriteest people of all time, memory and learning expert, as well as a good friend, Mr. Jim Quick. Jim, welcome to the crib, man.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
So good to have you here. You and I are doing a webinar.
Yes.
On Wednesday, July 30th, and you're talking about memory, right? I mean, that's something that I know that a lot of people struggle with, and I even struggle with sometimes, is remembering things, memorizing things. Tell us what you're going to talk about.
Absolutely. First of all, I really like your shirt.
Superman and Batman. Awesome. Make a dynamic duo, buddy.
We're going to talk about superpowers, specifically mental superpowers. We're going to give you the I think one of the most important superpowers to unleash nowadays in today's information age is your memory power. Yeah. People don't realize that, that you hear that you use only about 10% of your brain's potential. We're going to show you how to light up the other 90% so that you could advance your career, your business, your health, become an expert at your field. And, I really do believe that, repetitive forgetfulness could sometimes lead to failure. I forgot could be some of the most costly words, to you. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot the meeting. I forgot that person's name. All those things that we forget, it wastes time and there's an opportunity cost.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say there's a cost for that.
Yeah.
Let's not have our audience wait until the webinar, though. I want them to learn something right now. I want them to learn about learning. So they're going to attend this webinar.
Yep.
How can you help them get the most out of it? Give us like your 4 top tips for learning.
Okay, so I'll give you 4 tips for learning anything faster, any subject, any skill. And I certainly would love for you to be able to apply it towards the webinar, because this is going to be a great webinar. We're going to talk about on this webinar also, I'm going to give some secrets on how to remember names. That's one of the things that people, and I'm going to share with you the first time I got to meet President Clinton. A lot of people know he's got this amazing charisma and he's a connector. But a lot of people don't know he's amazing remembering names. So I'm going to share those kind of secrets. I get to also work with a lot of influencers. I'm going to share, how actors memorize their scripts and really fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. But 4 things you could apply right now to learn any subject or skill faster. I want you to remember FAST, F-A-S-T. F-A-S-T. So the F stands for forget. And why would you start with forgetting, for a memory seminar? I want you to be able to forget the things that are on your mind. A lot of times as we become adults, we don't learn things quite as fast because we feel like we know it already. And so that it's kind of like, those old proverbs where, if you're filling the cup of, full of tea and it gets it full and then you can't put more information in there because it's already full. So forget what you already know about the subject. The other things you want to forget are things like situational things. A lot of times they say there was a study done at Harvard that says you can only focus on 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at any time, done by George Miller, which means that if you're focusing, you're learning something like on a webinar that's really important, but maybe 2 of your bits of information is thinking about the kids, or 3 bits of information is thinking about work. It only leaves you 1 or 2 bits of information to really focus on what's there. And so forget about everything else that's not urgent and important. And then the third thing you want to be able to forget are things about your limitations. I would invite you when you're on this webinar, because I'm going to show you some really cool things that are going to impress not only yourself, but other people around you. But forget about what you think is possible. And so limitations, people have limiting beliefs on how they are with their health or how much they're worth financially. People have beliefs about how smart they are. So forget about those limitations. I invite you to have more of a positive self-talk, because your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. And a lot of us, when we're saying, I forget, these people's names, I would forget the grocery list at the health food store if I didn't write it in triplicates, that kind of thing. It doesn't empower you.
Weren't you told that you had a learning disability at one point?
I did. When I was, so a lot of times people see me on stage where I'll memorize a room full of people's names or long lists of words or long numbers and stuff. I always tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's really possible, because you could do it too. And the only thing is we're not shown how to do it, because I believe there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's just a trained memory and an untrained memory. And we're not taught. I always thought in school, they teach you 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. I think the 4th R should have been recall, remembering, because Socrates says there is no learning without remembering. And that's one of the big challenges. So school teaches you what to learn, math, history, science, but not always how to learn. And I was a product of that. When I was 5 years old, I had a really bad accident, head injury actually, and it left me learning challenge. And so I was very slow to learn to understand things in school. It took me an extra couple years to learn how to read even. So I was not only a slow reader, but just it took me so long to process information. And so, later on, I came up with these skills, these brain hacks, if you will, to unlock these superpowers in order for me to compensate. And I lost my health over it, because I would have to, pull all these all-nighters and not sleep, not eat, not exercise, just to keep up with the kids around me. And I ended up in the hospital. I actually passed out in public in college. I fell down a flight of stairs in the library, and I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. I was hooked to all these IVs, malnourished, down to 117 pounds, just because I was not prepared, to handle. And I think nowadays, like, don't you think there's like so much information, and it's affecting our health? There's actually a new term actually was released last month. It's called digital dementia.
Really?
Digital dementia. This is the state of our brain, they say, is atrophying because we're not using it as much, because we're outsourcing our brain and we're outsourcing our memory to digital devices.
I don't know anybody's phone number except for my mom's.
That's one of the big challenges, right? Like, think about how many phone numbers you used to know like 15 or 10 years ago and how many you know now. So we're outsourcing our memories to our phones. It's keeping our calendars. It's doing simple math for us. It's keeping our to-do list, the things, people's contact information, their emails, and which is good because it's very convenient. Yeah. But because your brain is like a muscle, it grows stronger with use. But if you don't use it, you lose it, and it's not getting the exercise. So we're getting, one of the ways to stave off Alzheimer's and dementia and brain aging challenges is by keeping your brain active. And actually, it was on the cover of Time magazine where they had these women living well into their 80s, 90s, 100 and above. They call them super nuns. Because, and they found out how, is because they were keeping their brains active. And then by keeping your brain active and strong, it actually added years to your life, but also life to your years, which is really cool. So yeah, I had the absolute worst memory challenges of anyone that I knew. And I'm just proof positive that if you learn the right processes, because here's the thing, is we were told a lie. We were told this lie that your memory or your intelligence is fixed. Right. It's fixed like it's your shoe size or it's your height or something like that, and it's absolutely not true. In fact, memory is not something you have. Memory is something you do. It's something. It's not a noun. It's a verb. So it's a process. So there's no magic pill. I would love it if someone created a brain pill and just gave you photographic memory. That's what we're not talking. We're not talking about a magic memory pill, but there is a magic process. And what I've spent the past 20 years of my life doing is traveling around the world, talking to some of the most intelligent individuals out there and finding out how they hack their brain to be able to create those kind of results, how they remember names, how they learn foreign languages faster, how they give speeches without notes, how the waiter or the waitress could remember everyone's order, without any kind of effort.
I'm always amazed by that. Yeah. Memory is what you do. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So it's a verb, and what we do is, I believe in this thing called POP, patterns of power. I think, that success, leaves all these clues all over the place, and just like Tony Robbins talks about, and it's just like, what are those patterns? And so there's patterns to health, there's patterns to reading faster, there's patterns to remembering things, and that's what I'm going to share on the webinar.
Let's get back to fast.
Yes.
You said forget your limitations was the last one.
Yes. So you're forgetting the things. So you're forgetting what you know about the subject. You're forgetting about what's going on. Yeah, that's not urgent and important. You're forgetting your limitations. The A in fast stands for active. Because that's the challenge with, we all grew up with this 20th century education, and 20th century education was this assembly line, cookie cutter, one size fits all, sit quietly by yourself, don't talk to your neighbors. But that's very passive, right? And it prepared us for a world where, that doesn't exist anymore. It prepares us for work in factories and on farms. But the world we live in now, it's like information is flying at us, and you can't use those same old techniques to be able to advance yourself. And so I feel like we're living this age of electric cars and spaceships that are going to Mars, but how we choose to learn is just this horse and wagon, this horse and buggy, and that's how people are learning. So when it comes to your memory, you need to be active. And so what I mean by that is when you want to learn something brand new, a subject or a skill, especially what you're going to learn on this webinar, is participate and play full out. Because what you put in is what you get out. Just like going to the gym, right? You have to be active. You can't just be sitting in there, because learning is not a passive sport. And
you're training your brain.
You're training, you're being active. So it's not about sitting down and just consuming information, like we kind of like teachers would push information inside our head. There's too much information. It's not consumption, it's creation. Gotcha. It's co-creation. So leave comments. During the webinar, we'll invite you to be able to tweet about this. We'll invite you to be able to post comments down below, in the chat, so we could talk about it. Or take notes. They say a lot of people know that there's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve. We've all had this experience where we learn something brand new. We go to an event, we watch a webinar, read a book, and we get something really valuable. But then what happens a couple days afterwards?
Totally forget.
It's gone, because that forgetting curve says that 48 hours, 80% later, 80% of it could be gone. Just by taking notes, it could boost it up 40, 50%. And so we'll talk about some advanced note-taking techniques on the webinar also as well, whole brain note-taking techniques. And then the S in FAST stands for state. And state is like, just a fancy word for the current condition or the mood of your mind and your body. And when I talk about state, it's kind of like the feelings that we have. And states, because all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent. But the state we learned things back in the old world of learning, back in school, was, it was this, right? This was how bored we were, and we're slumped. Exactly. Right. And the state that you learn something in is the state you're going to attach it to the information. So if you ever learned something that was valuable, but you were in a kind of a bored, dull, kind of passive state, that's the state that you're going to code it in. And the part of your brain that codes long-term memory is also the part of your brain, this kind of middle brain, that also is responsible for a lot of emotions. So your state's very important. So I'm going to show you different ways you can move your body, different questions that you can ask to control your state and manage it, which is going to be really, really fun to be able to do. And then finally, the T in FAST stands for teach. Teach. Because when you watch this webinar coming up, I want you to think about someone that you really care about, whether it's a coworker or a friend or a family member, maybe a significant other, maybe it's your children, but come with that person in mind. And how would you go about teaching what you're about to learn to that person? Because once you learn it differently, like if you had to watch this webinar, read that book, or go to that event, and you had to teach it the next day to somebody, would you put on your professor's cap? Would you own that information differently? Would you be more active automatically? Because here's the thing when you teach, I always, when I heard that phrase, like those who can't do teach, I never thought it was a negative. Those who can't do business, teach business kind of thing. I always thought like, yes, if I can't do something, teach it, then I could do it. And so we're going to show you a process to be able to teach this to other people, and then so you could play it forward.
Yeah. When I first started doing YouTube videos many years ago, when I would read, I would always think, how can I teach this?
Yeah.
How can I take it to YouTube and teach people how to do it, and it really helped me learn.
Absolutely, because when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. And
Exactly.
that's the power of it.
FAST, POP. You have all these acronyms or mnemonics. You use those a lot as well too.
I do. I like kind of old school some of the things. Like we learned like homes back in school, like for the Great Lakes, like Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, Roy G. Biv, and stuff like that.
They help tremendously. I used to use those in college all the time.
Yeah, everyone who's watching this will remember FAST. They'll remember it forever.
Jim, great stuff, man. Webinar, July 30th. Make sure you sign up. Click the link right down there. Sign up. We'll send you the replay as well if you can't make it. Jim, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Mark your calendar. Make sure you don't forget.
My man.